I never imagined that a single night could fracture every certainty I had carefully built around my life, but that is exactly what happened. And even now, when I replay it in my mind, it feels like watching someone else make those choices, someone reckless and wounded and desperate for something she couldn't even name. My name is Isabella. I'm 27 years old, and until that Saturday, I would have told anyone who asked that I was happy married to Ryan, the man I had once believed was my forever with. A cozy apartment downtown, shared routines, inside jokes, quiet Sunday mornings, and plans about future trips and maybe even children one day. Yet, beneath that polished surface, small cracks had already begun to spread. Cracks I refused to acknowledge, like how Ryan had grown distant over the past few months, coming home later each evening with the smell of office air and exhaustion clinging to him. Kissing my forehead absent-mindedly while scrolling through emails, assuring me he was just under pressure at work, and I, determined to be the supportive wife, swallowed my loneliness and told myself it was temporary. So when my mother called that Thursday, inviting us to dinner with her and Chuck at a new restaurant downtown, I tried to ignore the flicker of unease that stirred inside me at the sound of my stepfather's name, because although he had been married to my mother for 5 years and wore the mask of charm effortlessly, there had always been something in the way his eyes lingered, a second too long in the way his compliments curved dangerously close to impropriety that made my skin tighten, but I had dismissed it for my mother's sake, convincing myself I was overreacting, and when Saturday arrived, I slipped into a black dress that hugged my waist and fell just above my knees, telling my reflection that it was just another family dinner. Nothing more, while Ryan buttoned his blue shirt behind me in the mirror. Unusually quiet, his smile strained when I asked if he was all right, brushing it off as work fatigue. And perhaps if I had pressed him then, if I had insisted we stay home, everything would have unfolded differently. Yet we went, arriving at the softly lit restaurant where my mother greeted us warmly. And Chuck's gaze traveled over me in a way that made me instinctively fold my arms. His voice low as he told me I looked beautiful. Ryan, shaking his hand politely, unaware or unwilling to notice the tension that pulsed beneath the table as drinks were ordered and conversation drifted from vacations to real estate to our upcoming anniversary, which I had shamefully half forgotten, and I watched with growing discomfort as Ryan ordered whiskey after whiskey, far more than usual, his laughter turning loud and unfocused, while Chuck's comments about my dress and my appearance grew increasingly bold under the guise of humor. My mother attempting to redirect the conversation, her smile tight, and then suddenly Ryan's head dropped forward onto the table, the dull thud slicing through the music of the restaurant as silence engulfed us. Humiliation burning through me while Chuck chuckled and placed his hand over mine, suggesting we step outside for air while my mother stayed with my sleeping husband, and in that moment anger clouded my judgment, anger at Ryan for embarrassing me for leaving. Me alone in that discomfort for the weeks of distance that had hollowed me out, and instead of refusing, instead of returning to my husband's Ryan's side, I allowed Chuck to guide me into the cool night, his palm firm against the small of my back, as he proposed we wait at a nearby bar. And though every rational instinct told me to go home, I nodded, driven by a reckless mix of resentment and curiosity, as if some buried need to feel seen had overridden my sense of loyalty. The bar glowed with neon lights and vibrating music, and Chuck ordered martinis without asking my preference, the alcohol sliding down my throat and warming the edges of my anger into something dangerously soft. The dance floor crowded and alive as he pulled me into motion, his hands steady on my waist. His confidence intoxicating in a way that felt both empowering and deeply wrong, and for a few suspended minutes I surrendered to the rhythm, to the illusion of being desired, of being the center of someone's undivided attention. Closing my eyes as if that could erase the boundaries we were crossing. But when I opened them, his face was inches from mine, his breath warm as he confessed he had always found me irresistible, words that should have repulsed me, yet instead ignited a confused spark of validation. And I hesitated just long enough for him to close the distance, his lips brushing mine, and in that split second, I could have stepped back, could have ended it yet. I didn't, and the kiss deepened, charged with years of unspoken tension and the reckless haze of alcohol, until a voice cut through the music like shattered glass. My name screamed with such raw anguish that my blood ran cold, and there stood Ryan, eyes blazing with betrayal, his face twisted in a way I had never seen before as he lunged toward Chuck. Fists, flying bodies colliding against the sticky bar floor, while people shouted and scattered, and I screamed for them to stop. But the damage was already done, security dragging them apart, Ryan's lips split and swelling, Chuck's nose bleeding, and when Ryan looked at me, the hurt in his expression felt heavier than any slap, heavier than the crowd's judgment, his voice hoarse as he declared it was over, that he couldn't believe I had done this with my own stepfather, and no explanation formed quickly enough to undo what he had witnessed, because there are moments when the truth is simply as ugly as it appears. He left, disappearing into the night, and I stood there trembling, pushing Chuck away when he tried to approach, disgust and shame flooding through me as reality settled like a suffocating fog, and I fled to my best friend Marie's apartment, collapsing into her arms and confessing everything between sobs, the dinner, the drinks, the dance, the kiss, the fight, each detail sounding more sordid aloud than it had in my mind. And the following day I awoke to dozens of missed calls, most from Ryan, some from my mother, a few from Chuck, my stomach churning as Marie urged me to face my husband, yet when I finally reached him he answered only to say he would come home that evening to talk. And the hours until 8 felt like a slow march toward execution, the apartment eerily unchanged when I returned, as though time had paused before my mistake, Ryan arriving with dark circles under his eyes and an exhaustion that cut deeper than anger, raising his hand to stop my apologies as he demanded to understand how I could betray him so openly, how he was supposed to trust me again. And though I insisted it had been a moment of weakness fueled by alcohol and hurt pride, he countered that weakness is still a choice. That my anger at him did not justify turning to another man, especially one who sat at our family table, and when he said he needed space, that he would stay with his brother while he decided whether our marriage had a future. Something inside me cracked irreparably, because uncertainty is sometimes crueler than finality. And after he packed a suitcase and walked out, I collapsed on the living room floor, only to receive a message from my mother insisting we speak the next day. And when I faced her, she revealed Chuck's version of events: that I had seduced him, that I had pursued him for years, that he had merely succumbed to my drunken insistence and hearing. That lie felt like a second betrayal layered atop the first. My pleas of innocence met with her conflicted gaze as she struggled between trusting her husband and her daughter, ultimately asking for time, while Chuck conveniently left to think, leaving me ostracized from both marriage and family in a matter of days. I returned to Marie's apartment hollowed out, drifting through hours of self-recrimination until she urged me to seek therapy, to confront not only the mistake, but the emptiness that had made it possible. And with Dr. Rodriguez, I began unraveling the months of emotional distance I had ignored, the craving for validation I had buried beneath pride, the resentment that had festered quietly between Ryan and me, none of which excused my actions, but all of which illuminated the vulnerabilities I had refused to acknowledge. And as weeks passed, I found work at a small publishing house, rebuilding fragments of independence while grappling with guilt that ebbed and surged unpredictably. Until one afternoon, Ryan finally messaged asking to meet at our usual cafe, and as I approached him, there, his expression guarded yet softer than before, I realized that whatever future awaited us would depend not on denying what happened, but on confronting it fully, accepting responsibility without deflection, and acknowledging that a single night does not emerge from nowhere, but from the accumulation of unattended fractures. And whether our marriage survived or not, I understood at last that the true turning point was not the kiss itself, but the moment I chose silence over honesty long before that night ever began.